Welcome to Southeastern 14's preview series for the 2023 football season. We are doing this in mid-February, so some details may have changed, some names may have come and gone by the time you see this. If it's later in the spring or summer, don't worry, we'll update you as those things happen and reset it again closer to the season. But hey, it's never too early to start talking SEC football, and the Cats are an interesting program. Last year, a little bit of a step back. Although, if you watch that offensive line early in the season, you had the Chris Rodriguez suspension to compound that. It shouldn't have been a complete surprise. Lost some guys on the defensive side, too. Also lost Liam Cohen. Guess who's back? Liam Cohen's back. They lose Will Levis, but they get Devin Leary. They lose Chris Rodriguez, but they get Ray Davis from their Eastern Division neighbor, Vanderbilt. They'll have some defenders back. They got a good trio of playmakers back at wide receiver, guys that can stretch the defense. It's going to be a lot more interesting in Lexington next year, Blayne, and I think particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, that transfer haul that they had, you mentioned Devin Leary and Ray Davis. I mean, you couldn't ask for better guys to come in there and replace Will Levis and Chris Rodriguez. Ray Davis is a guy who I don't think he's as just naturally gifted maybe as a Chris Rodriguez in terms of his vision a little bit and things like that, but he runs extremely hard and he really puts he puts a lot of effort out there, and he's going to be a guy who is going to do things the right way and fit in that Mark Stoops type mold of how they go about and play things up there in Lexington as well. And you talk about a guy behind him in Jaton McClain that is, done some good things from time to time for Kentucky. They look for him to take another step forward as a kind of 1-2 punch there with Ray Davis. But they also brought in a guy that they're looking to start at left tackle in Marquez Cox from Northern Illinois. Does that name sound familiar to you? Kentucky fans, it should, because he played for Northern Illinois against the Wildcats, and Northern Illinois played a heck of a game when they came up there. So Mark Stoops very much in that same mold as a Kirby Smart, where he's not going to bring in a transfer typically unless it's a guy that they have either scouted or they have played against, in terms of seeing them up close and personal, maybe even had a relationship with them recruiting beforehand. So undoubtedly Cox, impressed Stoops and company bringing it in. But Liam Cohen is the biggest addition on offensive side. That Kentucky offense 2 years ago just really blossomed with him as the offensive coordinator, so much so that like you mentioned, he got the opportunity to go to the Rams, and now he brings that NFL pedigree and experience back with him to Lexington. And oh, by the way, Chris, Kentucky, and yeah, you're not hearing me wrong when I say this, Kentucky may have the second best trio of wide receivers in the SEC behind what's over at LSU. Dane Key, Barian Brown, and Tavion Robinson are all electric. Dane Key was tremendous as a freshman last year. That play that he made in the swamp early on in the season, going up and catching that contested ball, there, that really helped him to win that game. That is three really good receivers. Barian Brown also dangerous in the return game. So really could be some electrifying stuff on the offensive side. Of course, Kenneth Horsey comes back for his senior year at left guard, a guy that's going to provide not only some physicality, but some leadership as well. So a lot to be excited about on the offensive side of the ball for Kentucky in 2023.
Well, some things to be excited about on defense, too. 4 of the top 7 tacklers back. I think that's Derek Jackson, Trevin Wallace, J.J. Weaver. It seems like Weaver's been there forever.
Yeah.
And Deion Walker, who was a freshman All-American. The Cats' identity's been they're big on the line of scrimmage. They weren't quite as much of a force to be reckoned with, but that they've developed defensive backs well. And look, defense is where this program's been built with Mark Stoops, and you'd have to think they pick it back up there next year.
Yeah, I think Kentucky's doing Walker a little bit of a favor, listing him at 330 on their roster. Deion Walker is humongous. I would venture to say this young man is every bit of 345, 350, 6'6", 6'7". He just blots out the sun when you're standing beside him. I mean, he's just humongous over there. Like they said on 300, we will fight in the shade. Well, that's how the guy lining up across the offensive lineman, lining up across from Walker feels like. They got Oxendine coming back. You mentioned Weaver. It seems like Oxendine has been there forever as well. So that, Weaver and Oxendine are two guys that really could provide a lot of leadership to that defense with Mark Stoops. Listen, they were a top 12 defense in terms of overall defense last year. So it is going to be another year of Mark Stoops trying to play complementary football. Where, listen, Georgia, we all saw throughout the year last year that Georgia was one of the best offensive teams in the country. They come into Kentucky late in the year, and Kentucky held them to 16 points and really stymied them in the red zone. They just couldn't score offensively. So if they can replace a couple of pieces, some new guys coming in at a couple of different places in the secondary, but if they can replace those, and they got to replace their might linebacker as well, then man, you're coming back and talking about a Kentucky defense that could really, really have some momentum with a offense that's able to sustain some drives a little bit better and not turn the ball over as much. That could be huge for Kentucky in 2023.
The schedule, Blayne. Kentucky is doing what it always does. It has several built-in wins in the schedule. That was smart of Mark Stoops to build that program, get it perpetually in bowls. I think that the September should give the Cats a chance to do that. Let's see. Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron. So you got two of probably the worst 25 or 30 teams in the FBS, particularly Akron there to start. Eastern Kentucky in the middle, although Eastern's been a pretty decent FCS team, and you got the in-state component. That could be interesting, but I doubt it will be. Then let's see, up next, you got a trip to Vanderbilt, which beat the Cats last year in a pretty evenly matched game as you watched it play out. Florida, I got a lot of questions about the Gators. Then going to Georgia. Kentucky has made that game interesting in recent years, has found ways to match up with Georgia, hasn't found ways to win it, but maybe make it more interesting than a lot of people. And then right before the bye, Missouri, which has kind of been perpetually stuck in 6-6 land. I'm not saying a lot of easy wins. Well, there will be some off the bat, but a lot of interesting games for Kentucky before that bye.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't see any worse than and this is early on. Things could happen. I don't see any worse than one loss in those first games before the bye week, and that'd be in Georgia. I mean, they would really have to stub their toe. I feel like Florida is going to be down even worse than they were this previous year. I think Missouri is as senior laden as they're going to be this year. They have to go on the road to Kentucky. Kentucky gets them at home. And listen, I just think that Kentucky, like you said, is going to continue their standard of play on defense, and they're going to get even better offense with Liam Cohen coming back and Devin Leary being a guy who can just really, really deliver the ball in tight windows with anticipation and accuracy. I think he's going to be electrifying with that wide receiver core around him. And, but I do want to take exception. How dare you, besmirch the good name of the Akron Zips with Joe Moorhead? I mean, Nick Saban tried to go get Joe Moorhead to be his offensive coordinator, right? I mean, he's a former SEC guy. We got to show here on Southeastern 14 the Joe Moorhead a little love. Now the Akron's terrible. I'm just kidding.
Pop the Zips.
They'll pop
you
them.
really sold that for a minute. Well, they may not pop some teams right after the bye. Tennessee, which that was a complete mismatch a year ago. That'll be more competitive this year, I'm sure, because it can't not be. At Mississippi State, I don't know what to make of that one. Then Alabama. At South Carolina, that's when Carolina really is playing at its best.
Yeah.
And then at Louisville in a game that Kentucky won a year ago, Louisville made a coaching change to Jeff Brom. That's a really fascinating 5-game stretch there.
It is. It is. I think there'll be obviously a lot of motivation for that Tennessee game. You have them at home. I think if you're let's if you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you're 6-1 and coming off a bye week with Tennessee coming at home, if that's where they're sitting at, you talk about Big Blue Nation being really fired up, especially with how poorly basketball season has gone. They're going to want to wash that out of their mouth, Chris. We'll cover that. You can watch some of our videos on Kentucky basketball. But listen, Big Blue Nation will want to be excited. And with Tennessee having done what they did to the Wildcats last year, a lot of revenge factor there. I think that Mississippi State is maybe going to struggle this year to find some identity. So I think Kentucky, even on the road, will have a opportunity to win that game. And listen, you just got to get to the point. If you could get to that Alabama game with only one blemish on your record, if you're Kentucky, I think that would be an ideal scenario and give you a legitimate opportunity at a 10-win season in the regular season. Kentucky's gotten to 10 wins a couple of times with the bowl game included, but to be able to do that in the regular season mark under Mark Stoops, that would be tremendous.
Well, if Kentucky gets to that game with one loss, then that's a top 10 team, probably a top 5 team. I'm not quite that optimistic, but I know this. You can kind of pencil in Kentucky for 7 wins every year. Put that part in Sharpie, and then it's just how many more do you go up from there?
Yeah, I'm extremely high on Kentucky. Really, I really am. I think Devin Leary being able to distribute the ball to those talented wide receivers, and listen too. It wasn't necessarily utilized as much last year, but Kentucky has some talented tight ends. Jordan Dingle, Justice Dingle. I mean, those guys coming back. Isaiah Cummings, Josh Caddis. So listen, there's a talented tight end group, but I think the strength of this Kentucky team is going to be Liam Cohen's creativity, staying balanced just enough with Ray Davis, but then Devin Leary having those weapons in Brown, in Dane Key, and Tavion Robinson to really attack. Tavion Robinson's a guy that they can move all over, motion, create mismatches with. Think of what Cohen and them tried to do with guys like Cooper Kupp and the Rams and stuff like that. There's some exciting stuff that can go on, and Robinson's a heck of a guy in the return game, and so is Brown as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. I really like Kentucky's offense, and we know the defense is always there. So I'm really high on Kentucky, Chris.
Yeah, can't wait to see how it pans out. It's going to look a lot different this coming year, and I think it's going to be for the better. When it kicks off and well before it, we'll have you covered, Kentucky fans. We've also got you covered for hoops. You may not want to hear that right now. In baseball, we even had your head coach, Nick Mingione, on. Great dude.
They don't want to talk about basketball.
No, they might want to talk baseball. No, they don't. More than basketball. Just kidding. But anyway, we got you covered wall to wall in those 3 sports. Best way to get all that stuff is hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps us out too. He's Blayne Gilmer. I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.